Anyway, what I would like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is to talk to you about Meralco in the context of innovation. Yes, those two words go together. Too many people think that Meralco is a 110 years old company who really, the only purpose they exist for is to charge customers a lot of money for electricity. If you believe that, first of all, you should look at your electric bill. Because if you look at your electric bill, actually, our portion is only about 18% of the total electricity component. But again, in the context of this event, summit, I want to give you a glimpse of how we want to transform as a business, how we are transforming as a business to become a very much a customer-centric organization. Now, here's the dilemma. On one hand, utilities are being driven by the fact that we have to transform because there's many reasons for transformation, and I will describe this in a second. On the other hand, we are very much regulated. So how do you take heavily regulated business? How do you take innovative, customer-driven reason why we should be in the business, and you combine this together? And I can tell you it's an extremely tough job, not even in the context of Meralco, but for that matter, any utility, electric utility globally. So, first of all, I have to give you kind of set the stage that drives our transformation in the context of ICT and many things we do business-wise. There are four main trends that drastically transform and will transform energy world. Those four trends are nothing new. If you've been in the energy world or you've interacted with the energy stakeholders, those are very common, and very often in the context of those four pillars, we describe innovation. Now, here's the problem. We all get excited about innovation. I don't think we truly understand the implication or the impact that actually innovation is bringing to energy world. For example, shifting growth centers, what it means? Well, by 2030, about 60% of the population globally will live in the cities. Obvious fact. So it's not only about the demand response or the demand capabilities providing electricity, but also within that 60% of the population globally, we will create about 2.5 billion new middle class consumers. That also includes Philippines. What happens when you create 2.5 billion of new middle-class consumers? The standard of living is going up, the expectation of density of electricity consumption is going up, which means we have to redefine how we have to generate, deliver, and distribute power in the context of the fact that electricity will become a commodity for 2.5 billion new consumers. Many of them will be here in the Philippines. Second of all, renewable distributed going mainstream. About 70% of new investment into generation will be into any type of distributed and renewable generation. Now, today when we think about this, we say, oh, I see a beautiful panel on the roof, that's cool, you have a customer, you have someone who generates their own power. Everything is nice. However, if you take situations in Australia, in Europe, in the US, where actually the level of penetration of PV or photovoltaics, distributed generation, renewable is reaching extremely high level, which means anyone can put on the roof their own generation. Anyone can become a generator. Anyone can become a mini utility to distribute, to send the power to neighboring house, to neighborhood, to community, which means that represents a completely different business model we have to embrace in the context of bidirectional power flow, of making sure that what was originally prescribed to the big generators, and we had few of those, now every single household in the world at some point can be self-generated. That's a huge implication to how we have to look at innovation. Third component, cross-industry convergence. What it means? It means that I may need to consider a different business model of how I invest. It's not anymore about CapEx for me, it's about OpEx. Now, where's the problem? If you look at decades of old industry where regulator tells you the only way you can recover your investment is CapEx, how do you change the mindset of providing different business model that is more performance driven, that is more OpEx driven, And in many cases, actually regulators are not sometimes up to speed with the industry trends. So on one hand, you try to be an innovative utility or innovative business. On the other hand, you have a regulation that is very much historically performance-driven. How do you reconcile this? That's another problem statement. And of course, you all hear probably of Internet of Everything, Internet of Things. And I will spend on that a few minutes because that's a huge implication in the context of ICT on us as a utility. So many of those trends, you probably have heard definitions: smart grid, smart city, smart region. They've been in the industry. Interestingly, every time you talk in the context of growth, renewable, distributed, you talk in the context of new industry convergence, for some reason this ICT piece was usually left out. If you look how smart grid evolved, it was, oh, we need more automation. Oh, we need distributed generation. We need electric vehicle. But somehow we didn't believe that the IT component, the ICT component is part of the transformation. And after fact, we said, oh, we actually cannot deliver the performance we wanted because we forgot about important aspect, which is called ICT. So we're in the catch-up mode in the utility in that specific space. But again, that's a challenge that we have to overcome. Now, industry convergency adoption, cloud computing, aviation, all of this sounds cool and we all get excited. Here's the dilemma. On the top, we talk about information technology. On the bottom, we talk about the industrial technology, which is basically utility driven. What is the problem of bringing different industries together? So for example, what is the problem if I give my lineman iPad instead of printed map and he can follow with the iPad to the place of location where there is an outage? Okay? Or what does it mean if I use drone? Instead of sending someone to identify the power outage, I actually send a drone that flies and identifies the affected areas of power outage, of problem, tree on the line. Well, the problem is that both power industry or power technology as well as information technology space, they mature with the different speed. Now, why this is important? According to Bloomberg, there is about 2,500 projects to smart grid related or smart city related globally. 70% of those projects are still in the R&D pilot phase. If you look how long it takes to do a pilot project, it's usually 3 to 5 years. Now, what happens with my information technology within the 3 to 5 years? There's a big possibility I already have an obsolete technology by the time I'm done with the pilot without even having a scale deployment. So how do you reconcile the speed of change of two different industries, power industry and information technology industry, or ICT for that matter? Today we are deploying smart meters. And the question is, what telecommunication platform we should be using for smart meter? Should it be GPRS, 3G, 4G, LTE? Now, if I'm considering, we have in our footprint about 5.4 million customers. We would like to roll out our smart meter infrastructure with the permission of ERC across every single customer. By the time I'm done with the rollout, which will take about 6 to 10 years, what will be the prevailing telecommunication platform? You see the struggle we have to, as a utility, decide in the context of innovation and technology that very often we don't realize, or people who are not part of the utility don't realize that for us, innovation and strategic investment is very often on two opposing sides. It's hard to innovate and be prudent to deliver cost-effective electricity to the customer because we all pay for investment. And on the other hand, deal with uncertainty and risk associated with the quickly changing technologies that by the time we deploy, many technologies are already obsolete. So that's one of the problems. Internet of Everything. You hear this probably from different speakers: machine, data, process, people. Now, to give you scale, if I look at number of devices today in the Meralco footprint, we have about a couple 100,000 endpoints we could connect. If I look how we are going to evolve in the context of intelligent devices, in the context of new sensors that give me better information about power outage, better information about consumption in the real time. If I look at smart meter rollout, I will probably end up in the level of about 10 million endpoints, which means I have to figure out not only how to connect those assets, but how do you take that and translate into value-driven information of my performance. So some statistics here, which are very interesting. If you look at the single generation turbine in the power plant, it generates more gigabytes information per day than Twitter. How many of you have Twitter? I don't. I let my daughter have it. I'll be addicted to it. Okay? But you see the scale problem? Very often when we talk about the Internet of Things in the context of social media, we don't realize actually that in the context of energy, we talk about much bigger volume, not of the information that sometimes is disposable. You know, if I don't get the right away tweet from my daughter, it's okay. If my power plant stopped working for 1 minute, probably will not have electricity in this building, except maybe they have a backup power here, okay? So there's a different implication of data and the information behind Internet of Things in the energy world. Another thing, value. It is estimated, this is not our numbers, this is from Cisco, so credit to Cisco for that. It is estimated that if we interconnected devices globally, we could unlock additional potential of productivity and efficiency in the private sector at the level of about $15 trillion globally. Don't tell me that's not a value proposition. Now, why this is important? Many believe that we live right now in the third revolution, industrial revolution, where basically growth is contradicted with the available resources, natural resources that we have, which means we have to be much more productive and effective, smarter use the available resources we have. That's the answer, effectiveness and productiveness of what we do. Also, another statistics, if I use a predictive behavior to analyze my network in the context of gas-fired power plant, I can save about 60 billion annually if I improve efficiency of all gas-fired plant by only 1%. 1% improvement in efficiency can generate approximately $66, $70 billion of additional value. So, as a Meralco, what is our dilemma when we think about ICT transformation, ICT innovation, ICT technologies? Well, first of all, historical performance expectation is insufficient for us to make a forward-looking technology investment. Why? Because in the past, I dealt 100% with electromechanical. In the past, I dealt mainly with manual. Today, I deal with the digital technology that is quickly evolving. So I have to figure out how to manage that expectation. Second of all, not one size fits all. Too many people think that I can take technology that was developed in Europe or in US or in some other parts of Asia and deploy in the Philippines. You see, technology is enabler of the value. The question is, if I ask you today to put a business case for investment, and you had to analyze operational savings based on the cost of sending crew to repair, I don't know, broken pole. What is the cost of labor in Philippines versus cost of labor in US? Is there a big difference? It's a huge difference. So how do you take technology that was developed for relatively cost-intensive OPEX in US and Europe and put in the places where our cost of labor is an incremental, small incremental value, which means for me cost of labor is not so much saving. So again, not every technology that works somewhere else may have a good place in Philippines here. Another choice, invest to lead or deploy when justify. Should we go analog or digital? I like to use the example of iPads. How many of you have iPads or iPhones? You see, this is a dilemma we have to consider, which also goes to the point of incremental versus leapfrog investment. What is more expensive? The iPad itself with all the functionalities, or the cost of all the functionalities if I bought them as a separate product? Which one is more expensive? All the individual application, which means I actually have to look sometimes in the emerging countries like Philippines how to invest as a leapfrog into really something new that might be much more expensive, but I know on the long term it gives me much better value to my customer rather than going incremental small investment steps. Again, how do you reconcile this with your regulator who likes the chunks? They don't sometimes like a big story. How do you reconcile this? Okay, so again, it's another problem we have to look as a Meralco of being prudent as an investment and also caring in our about our customers in the context of investment cost. Speed of change. By the time I deploy something, it's already obsolete. By the time I deploy something, my organization hasn't adopted to it yet. You see, we forget that utility transformation is not only about the technology, it's also about people skills, capabilities, processes, organizational design. Today, I'm looking for data scientists. Who would think 5 years ago I would need in the utility world a data scientist? Who would think 5 years ago I need a IT/OT architect? Again, it's a certain dimensions we have to consider. So in the context of Meralco, customer-centric business model. Our primary goal of existence and what we try to do is to really be operational excellent, lean and mean, and very much customer focused. I know it's hard to believe in that when you pay your electric bill, but believe me, we really try to be very much customer-centric. And I can tell you, one of the things when we look at the investment is, how can we invest to build a middle class in the Philippines, which means reducing cost of the electricity. What is happening when I'm reducing cost of the electricity? I'm actually creating much bigger share of wallet for the customer to go and spend money. When I spend money on something, I build middle class, which means I build the prosperity, the country. Again, this is our mindset we try to do. Again, hard to believe, but actually that's, every day we ask ourselves this question. What it means in the context of our vision as an innovation and strategy, we look at the following. First of all, everything we do, we want to create competitive business economic advantage. Not many people know that in our franchise, as Meralco, we serve about 5.4 million customers, directly overall 25 million customers within the footprint of Philippines. We serve about 50% of country's GDP in our franchise. We serve about 60% of production output in the Philippines. So everything we do in the context of investment, in being prudent how we transform our business, has to have an implication of creating competitive business economic advantage for Filipino businesses. Productive, efficient, effective. On the other hand, we want to provide power to customer when they need it and where they need it. I'll tell you about some programs that we are trying to do in that aspect. So how do you, on one hand, provide superior power to businesses, on the other hand, enable cost-effective electrification when you need completely different solutions? You need a different mindset and different approach. Service provider, trusted advisor, new technology service enabler, those are additional values we try to build. What it means practically, and that ties to the ICT, the whole story. We have 5-point strategy in Meralco: market strategy, service delivery strategy, operational strategy, organizational strategy, advocacy. What that means, I'll concentrate on this summit relevant topics. Integrated OT and IT approach. I'll tell you what it means in our context in the succeeding slides. In the context of providing modern and enabling infrastructure, we are rolling out today 40,000 smart meters as a prepay. 40,000 was approved by by ERC, Energy Regulatory Commission, and we hope that we can take that 40,000 to the next level as soon as we talk to ERC and hopefully they will approve next. But again, why we roll out smart meters? Because we want customers to have timely information about electricity consumption, and eventually we would like to provide services to provide customers with energy management capabilities. Another things we are doing is advanced network automation. What it means, we are putting plenty of automation in the grid to reduce the outage time, improve the security and reliability of power supply. Another aspect we do, we call it integrated energy management, which is primarily a microgrid application or PV or energy storage. There are two reasons we want to do it. We recognize we have two opposing sides of the customers. We have customers who either don't have electricity in our franchise, or we have customers even who don't have a 24/7 electricity, which means actually it is cheaper to build a localized grid than build sometimes a big bold grid, building transmission distribution line, bringing the power to customers. So microgrid in the context of electrification. On the other hand, we recognize we have industrial commercial customers who pay a lot of money for electricity in the context of cost of doing business, and we would like to regionalize or localize certain generation and power capabilities to reduce the cost of electricity. This can be done in the concept of microgrid. So we are rolling this out. Big data, customer insight. We're rolling out big data strategy, not in the context of purely just to have a big data and sound sexy on the conference, but we believe that a huge component of us being customer-centric is to have customer insight, which means how customer wants to spend money on electricity, where is the value for money for electricity, how to better manage energy consumption. For that, we need a very solid analytics and capabilities to understand the customers. Green agenda, we are right now kind of working around some programs for e-bikes, e-trikes, e-jeepneys to support ADB initiatives around that specific initiative. Operational strategy, processes, cloud operations. We are slowly moving to cloud-based operations. Right now, we are looking only on the enterprise side, moving some of the enterprise side moving into cloud operations. I don't think we'll move 100% into cloud because many operational operational aspects in the context of security, we believe we can serve much better within our business footprint than doing the cloud. Organizational strategy, advocacy, those are kind of additional strategies. Again, we have a lot of initiatives. What is the key to that? In the past, utilities were made of kind of two major buckets. The enterprise side, the HR, finance, the asset, and then you had the operational side, SCADA, automation, operation of the network. In order to maximize the investment, maximize the performance aspects, we cannot anymore design our utility space as two separate silos. They have to be integrated. That's why we call it an OT and IT integrated approach. To maximize the investment. Second of all, to provide much faster and accurate response during business as usual conditions, plan and event and catastrophic events, and also enable certain scale that we can never get if we treat those two operational side and enterprise as standalone businesses. Now, to give you, if I become a little bit technical, I apologize. I'm an engineer as a background, so for those who are business, you can talk to me after all and I can explain details. What it means practically. In the past, if you look at the power grids, transmission, which is the big lines, they were automated. They actually had connected data. There wasn't a problem. The lower you went with the voltage level up to the house, it became more manual and electromechanical. Today, that disappears, that line of designing grid disappears, which means many of our distribution networks and low voltage networks become highly automated, which means we have to change completely the perception of CIT. In the past, ICT was centralized. Today, ICT is distributed, which means I actually think about enterprise bus in the substation level. Why? Because because of my automation and PV on the roof, and customer who wants to have electric vehicle, or customer who would like to have some additional services. I have to localize ICT in the substation level because I need much faster decision than I can accomplish by being centralized. So again, it's a paradigm shift I have to look in the context of our strategy. Another, in the past, there was a clear demarcation line between enterprise applications and operational applications. Let me use an example, demand response. One of the initiatives we're kicking off is a demand response in Meralco. We want to provide demand response in the context of peaking generation, which means we have about 300 hours in this country of very expensive peaking generation, and by providing demand response to industrial commercial customers, hopefully we can reduce necessity to pay expensive electricity for the peaking units. But in the past, demand response was purely what? Shifting the load to off time. Today, it's not about only shifting the load. If I have a photovoltaic installation on the roof, and I multiply this by 100 or million customers, I would like also my demand response application that was originally at the enterprise level also serve me as a contingency response for voltage regulation, frequency regulation, reserve margin, which means it becomes for me an operational application. Smart meter. Smart meter in the past You read meter every 15 minutes, hour, 4 hours, depends on the utility. It was very much non-operational, non-real-time application. Today, smart meter becomes part of my SCADA as a performance management and outage detection that helps better manage performance on the customer side. It becomes a real-time application. So again, we see a lot of shift from the enterprise side into operational side in the context of application and functionalities. The question is then, how do you design your ICT, whole concept, IT aspect, to make sure that you account for that? We talk about the distributed decision-making intelligence. I'm not going to repeat. So this is an example based on some investments. Today we're investing in smart meter, which is all this aspect, starting with 40,000. That delivers certain benefits. By integration, we can enable additional functions. If we're also starting what we call advanced distribution management system or outage management system application deployment. What it means is the following. Imagine you have a power outage. In the past, you had to pick up the phone and call us. With smart meter and outage management system, meter by itself would send the information to us saying, BARTOSZ WOJSZCZYK at Ayala Alabank, I will not tell you the street, so you don't throw the rocks, doesn't have a power. That meter sends to Meralco information, there is no power. That information is being received by the system. System by itself, then what it does, it sends information to the outage or to the network control saying, is there a way for us to automatically switch the network around that customers who are affected by the power outage can be quicker brought to power? So if I have a fault or I have a line on the ground this level, I can probably switch around automatically without sending the crews this part of the networks, and within the minutes I can bring back X amount of customers even without the human intervention. And I can isolate the power outage to bare minimum area of the impact. So there is an opportunity that by the time you're back home, when you had a power outage, your power actually was restored and you even didn't know about it. We're doing this today. And that requires very substantial strategy on the ICT side, because it's not only about the equipment that I put in the field, it's not only about the application I put in the back office, but how I integrate this, how I correlate the performance of this all together. And by integrated approach, I'm enabling a lot of capabilities and functions that as a customer we didn't have in the past. So integrated approach is a very important aspect of what we do. Now, we had an opportunity to go to Silicon Valley. We take our leaders in different places to kind of show a different way of doing stuff. You know, sometimes it's a mindset. Sometimes it's a matter of really show people how things can be done differently. We went to Silicon Valley and we realized that for us to be effective in the very risk-driven and technology uncertainty-driven world, we have to be much faster into technology evaluation space. What it means to us? Instead of evaluating strategies and technologies over many years, we are rolling out in Meralco what we call a due diligence process, which means from the strategy to the execution readiness, we would like to close that process of technology evaluation within 90 to 180 days. By reducing the time of evaluating, the time of deploying certain things, we believe we can much better improve the uncertainty or mitigate the uncertainty on the technology aspect of everything we do. Now, this is very unusual for utility, because in utilities, we used to tend to go years with decisions, kind of debate, you know, socialize. So it's a different mindset we have to deploy. And again, that helps us to minimize the obsolescence, uncertainty, select from diversity of the technologies, prioritize and align. What it means, I'll give you an example. We had a strategy, last mile telecommunication strategy, where we invited different vendors. And basically, they helped us to put together a solution approach and what we call a sandbox. In the sandbox, we gave them certain performance requirements, and I really didn't care what box we put it there, what was the color of the box, what was the voltage supply. They had to comply with the certain performance requirements, not as an individual technology, but an integrated approach on the ICT side. Now, what was interesting, we didn't design the pilot to prove that it will work. We designed the pilot to prove it will crash. Because I want to know in the uncertainty world of utility performance where something, it's almost like a crash test on the car. I want to know what's going to happen when I crash it. Because we live in Philippines. On average, we have 20 typhoons in Philippines, which means I have to not only design for business as usual performance, I have to design my network to perform during catastrophic events. So I have to have a different mindset on technology evaluation. Therefore, the process, therefore, a different approach on the ICT side we're trying to introduce, and we're doing it. So some key lessons learned. Telecommunication security is critical. Data privacy is another aspect. Flexibility, there's no out of the box. Smart grid, innovation, technology solutions. Scalability, many ideas works well in a small scale. It doesn't mean they work in the big scale. So how do you design your technology strategy for scale and then prove it at the smaller concepts to minimize the risk associated with deployment? Integration, it's very important to integrate legacy system with new. Data management, we talk about this centralized, decentralized, and then interoperability and managed by exceptions. Those are kind of key lessons learned. And again, if I had to summarize, I'm not sure if I'm over time, I apologize if I'm over time, Richard. But if I had to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, we really care about the customers. And everything we try to do is really in the mindset of minimizing the cost to our customers, because we realize that the cost of electricity in Philippines is second, third, first, after maybe Singapore and Japan, depends who competes against who. We are on the top, basically. But on the other hand, we have a huge uncertainty and the concept of constantly changing technologies that they evolve faster than sometimes the business we're in, faster than the regulatory market is willing to change, faster than the policy aspect is willing to adjust. So we have those opposing forces we have to deal on a daily basis, and I think the best judge for us is a customer at the end of the day. And we actually spend a lot of time listening to our customers. And anyway, with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.